بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يوم ندعو كل أناس بإمامهم فمن أوتي كتابه بيمينه فأولئك يقرؤون كتابهم ولا يظلمون فتيلا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Brothers and sisters, elders and guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If we were to sum up the message of Fatimiya Zahra alayhi salam that she left behind as a legacy, it would be that of taking ownership, responsibility, and initiative. Fatimiya Zahra alayhi salam embodied the meaning of true leadership. And if you can sum up leadership in one word, or a particular word to be assigned to leadership, is influence. A person of influence is a leader. A leader is a person of influence. Not necessarily a person of authority, because sometimes when we say the word leadership, we think of authority. You think of a boss in a workplace, or you think of a principal at a school, or you think of a father in a household. But those positions don't necessarily equate with leadership and influence. Because if you look at a broken home, a broken family, there could be a father and a mother and children and siblings, but the people in that family dynamic are not people of influence. So if the father is not a person of influence, is not taken seriously, then there's no leadership in that home. And according to one of the most famous authors who writes on leadership, he says everything rises and falls on leadership. Everything. Any structure, any community, any organization rises and falls on leadership. And you have good leadership and you have bad leadership. So when you look at some of the most successful organizations or structures, you look at a successful family. That successful family is built on leadership. The father or the mother or even the children are leaders in their own regard, meaning that they have influence. They take initiative. When you look at a good sports team has good leadership. There are good players on the team. The coach is a good coach. When you look at military, when you look at a business, when you look at a company, usually those who are at the leadership, at the helm, are the ones that take credit for the success and must take responsibility for the failures. Whenever you see a sports team win, usually they look at the coach and they credit the coach. When the Lakers were on a winning goal, yes, it was Kobe Bryant and Shaq, but they gave a lot of credit to whom? Phil Jackson, because he's the coach. He wasn't out there dribbling the ball. He wasn't out there running up and down the court, but he was the coach. He was the leader. He was influencing. He was bringing his players together. Likewise, whenever a team loses, who's one of the first people that they fire? They fire the coach, the head coach. Or someone who is in a leadership position, an influential position, such as if it's in football, the defensive or offensive coordinator. They trim the fat from the top. Because they look at those people who are making decisions. And they base the results, the successes and the wins, and the failures and losses based on who's at the helm? Who's in control? Who has the most influence? So when you look at a family, and sometimes you look at a broken family and you wonder, why is this family broken? Why are the people not talking to one another? One question that you should ask is, well, who's the leader in the family? Sometimes there's a father and a mother and children, but there's no leader in the family. That's why there's chaos. There's no one person who is influential. There's no one person who is setting the right example. So going back to that concept, everything rises and falls on leadership. There was a gentleman who is an author, and he builds what he writes upon and what he teaches on his experiences in the military. He was a Navy SEAL. You know, the Navy SEALs are one of the most celebrated groups in the military. They're first responders, and they have to train in the toughest of situations because when they deploy them for battle, for war, they put them in the toughest of situations to solve them. And what he was talking about was, whenever we were performing the training before we were deployed overseas, he says, what we did one time was we had certain exercises for these soldiers. And for these exercises, they were broken up into teams of 5 or 6. And they had to carry out a certain mission. And so, you know, you had the first place, second place, third place, and there were about maybe 6 or 7 teams. And each team had about 5 or 6 people on them. He says that during these exercises, one of these groups consistently came out in first place. Another group consistently came out in last place. And then the other groups were all in between. They would, you know, fluctuate between second, third, fourth, fifth, and whatnot. But there was one that was consistently in first place and one that was consistently in last place. And in that book that he talks about it, that chapter is called "No Bad Teams, Only Bad Leaders." So he says that as an observer, you know, we started seeing a pattern here, so we wanted to figure out, well, what's going on? Why is this team coming out in first place and this other team is coming out in last place every single time? It can't just be a coincidence. They're all, in terms of their shape and their size, they're all in great shape. You know, they're all pretty much equal when you look at them from their outward appearance. So he says, I began to, you know, hone in a little bit more. I started to listen to what each team leader was saying to their team, how they were pushing their team. And when I looked at what the winning team was saying, it was radically different than what the losing team was saying. He says the winning team, the leader was in there, he was out at front. If he was commanding his men, he was the first person to do it. If they had to lift something heavy, he was there at the helm saying, Ya Ali, Ya Abbas, he was raising it with them. And the losing team was the exact opposite. Their leader, had a great heart, was a great person, but he was constantly putting his people down. Constantly. He didn't know how to talk to them properly. He didn't know how to motivate them. His idea of motivating them was to swear at them, to call them names. Typical stuff that you see when you watch movies on the military, how the drill sergeant calls them names and insults them and demeans them and demoralizes them. So he said, you know, since we're having fun here, why don't we just why don't we do an experiment? Why don't we switch up the leaders of the two teams and see how that makes a difference? And so they switched up the leaders of the two teams. The leader from the winning team put him on the losing team. He wasn't very thrilled about that because he had a winning team. Now he has to take care of a bunch of losers. And the leader from the losing team, he assigned them to the winning team. Well, the guys on the winning team, they weren't very thrilled about that either, that they were going to have this team leader. And it reflected in their results. The guys that were in last place, because the leader changed, they started crawling up the ranks until finally they were in first place. But the ones that were in first place, it was tough for them to catch up. Now, they didn't completely drop ranks, but it was tough for them to catch up because this team, this losing team, now had a great leader. So what he realized and what he writes about in that chapter is, if you're ever managing a team, if you're ever managing an organization, you could be a parent. That's an organization. That's a structure right there. That's a team. Or you could have your own company. Or you could be the leader of a youth group. Or you could be a manager at work. Or you could be assigned in your classroom to lead a task. He says it's about the leadership. And leadership isn't always the person who's at the top. The leadership is the person who has the most influence, who exercises the most influence. So it's not always authority. Sometimes you see people who are in positions of authority. They're assigned to a position of authority, but they have absolutely no leadership. Have you seen that? Sometimes you walk into a company, you walk into somewhere, and there's a boss there, or a manager, or a supervisor, which is just the title of authority, but that person can't tell their elbow from their rear end. They have no idea what's going on. That's not a person of influence. And sometimes you see people who are not in a position of authority, they're not assigned to a position of authority, but they have influence and they have leadership. And if you think about it, some of the most influential people in your life were not people of particular authority. It wasn't a boss at work. It wasn't the president of the social club. It was your grandma. It was your grandpa. It was somebody who actually cared about you. It was a best friend or a mentor or a coach. Someone who coached you on and off the field. That was a person of influence. So leadership doesn't boil down to authority. Leadership boils down to influence. And so the legacy that Fatima Zahra alayhi salam left behind, when we talk about leadership, she wasn't appointed to a certain place. Yes, she was the daughter of the Prophet, but we don't honor her just because she was the daughter of the Prophet. We don't raise her to the status that we raise her to just because she was a daughter of the Prophet. The Prophet had many relatives, some of them that are cursed in the Quran. Tabbat yada Abi Lahab wa tab. Abu Lahab was the uncle of the Prophet. Just being related to the Prophet didn't grant him any special merit. It didn't grant him a special position, no special treatment. So the people that we honor, such as Imam Ali alayhi salam, such as Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, such as the Imams, it's not just the position is why we honor them. We honor them because they were people of purpose, because they were people of courage, because they were people of influence, because they were people of initiative. So if you apply that to your own life and you think, well, I want to leave behind a positive legacy, you have to develop your leadership skills. And you can develop your leadership skills in any capacity. So when we talk about leadership, what we're talking about is the highest level of responsibility. So to be a leader, you have to be responsible. Meaning that you have to watch the way that you behave, watch the way that you act, watch what you say, watch how you dress, watch how you talk, watch how you walk. You have to observe all of those things. Just in the question and answer session, I was saying, I get questions all the time that, can I wear this, or can I wear that, or can I get a piercing, or can I get a tattoo, or can I do my hair like this, or can I do that? Can I go out? I get the question from guys, can I go out in shorts? Can I do? Ask yourself, instead of just asking what's halal and haram, ask yourself, who's watching my behavior? Do I have siblings that are watching my behavior? Do I have friends that are watching my behavior? Do I have people that are looking up to me? And the answer is, even if you're hidden in a room, in the corner of your room, there are still people that are watching you. And so at every moment of your life, understand that there are people that are watching you. So don't only base your behaviors on what's right and what's wrong. Yes, that's true. We observe the boundaries of the Sharia, what's halal and what's haram. But also take into consideration that people are watching you. People are watching your behavior. So when you lose your temper, know that people are watching you. When you decide to engage in questionable behavior, know that people are watching you and they're looking up to you. And it was very easy for the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, if they wanted, it was very easy for them to take the easy route. They were offered, all of them, beginning from the Prophet, all of the Imams, they were all offered things, they were all offered materials, they were all offered possessions, they were all offered positions in government as well. For them to compromise some of their values. In exchange, they would have to compromise some of their principles. It would have been the really easy thing to do, but they knew that there were people that were watching them. They knew they had companions. They knew that they were in a position of leadership, and that position of leadership they didn't take for granted. So you will inevitably be in a position of leadership because you will be in a position of influence one day. Even if you're 12 years old, you're 13, you're 14, you may have younger siblings, you may have older siblings that are looking towards you. Well, you're automatically in a position of leadership. So take that into consideration. The Quran says, يَوْمَ نَدْعُ كُلَّ أُنَاسٍ بِإِمَامِهِمْ صَلُّوا عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِ مُحَمَّدٍ.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
That on that day, so when the Quran says يَوْمَ, day, the day of, what day is that? What day is that? The day of what? The day of judgment. When the Quran talks about the day, it's not Sunday. It's the day of judgment. It's talking about the day of judgment, the Quran. On that day, on the day of judgment, we will call people, we will summon people. Nad'u. Nad'u means to summon somebody, to call upon somebody. With whom? Bi-imamihim. Imam means your leader. And the Quran talks about good leaders and bad leaders, meaning good people of influence and bad people of influence. So think about it. Who are the people that are influencing your decisions on a daily basis? Do you know who it is? It's the 5 people that you hang out with. If you can count 5 people that you usually hang out with. Those people, those are the people that are influencing me the most. It's a very scary thought, isn't it? Because right now you're counting the 5 people that you hang out with. You're going to be resurrected with those guys. Do you want to be resurrected? If you're okay with being resurrected with them, that's fine. Don't change anything. But if you question, then what do you have to change? Who are you allowing to influence in your life? And you know, it's a lot of your self-image and your self-esteem and your confidence and your ability to succeed in your life comes from whom? If you're an athlete and you're trying to become a great basketball player, who do you hang out with? Naturally, you hang out with other basketball players. Guys that can challenge you, guys and girls that can challenge you. If you go in the gym, have you ever been in the gym and you've gone with a friend and you've had to drag that friend around? It's the most frustrating thing. Because you don't achieve your goal, that person doesn't achieve your goal, and it's the blind teaching the blind. And then you've wasted an hour and a half. But if you go in there with someone who can actually challenge you, somebody who's maybe in better physical shape or in better strength, it's satisfying, isn't it? Because you actually get the job done. If you're there to work out. Some people are not there to work out. Some people are there to check Facebook. So, understand influence and how important influence is. And sometimes we say, well, I'm going to hang out with this person, but they're not going to influence me. Really? Do you really believe that? You're going to consistently hang out with people and they're not going to influence you? You're not in control of that. You're not in control of that. You are in control of who you associate with. You can't control whether that person influences you or not. So write that down and understand that concept. So the question is, who do I want to be resurrected with? Who is my leader? Who's the person that influences me the most? Have you ever been with somebody and you've maybe sat down with them for half an hour or an hour and you felt good once you've walked away? They've positively influenced you. And some people, the exact opposite happens. You felt terrible, you feel horrible when you're around them because they've negatively influenced you. That's leadership. That's exactly what leadership is. So, understanding leadership from that point of view, God says that on that day that we're going to resurrect everybody with their leader. So the person that you're allowing to influence you, you're going to be resurrected with him, either good or bad. Another part of leadership is initiative. Being the first person to do something. Sometimes we're waiting for somebody to do the right thing. We spend our entire lives waiting for somebody to do the right thing so that we can follow their lead. But to be a leader, you have to have initiative. If the whole world stays quiet, what happens? Sometimes you see people doing great stuff around the world. And sometimes it just requires one person to get up and say, that's enough, I'm going to change. For everybody to follow suit. But what if that one person doesn't do it? What happens? Nothing ever changes. And so it's important for you to have initiative. And this you can apply in everywhere in your life. You're walking on your school campus and you see a piece of trash, pick it up. Throw it in the trash can. You're at the masjid, you're at the Husayniyah. You may not be a part of the board. You may not be a part of the executive committee. You may not be a part of the planning committee, but that doesn't mean that you don't have initiative and you just expect people to serve you all the time. Become a servant. Have initiative. Fatima az-Zahra alayhi salam had initiative. She saw things that were wrong. And she stood up and she spoke out against it. Yesterday we mentioned the example of FedEx. That was just something small. And that wasn't a personal issue. Because if it was personal, if you look at their personal life, well, they had a number of pieces of land. They had more than one date orchard that was producing income, that was, that was bringing in money, that they had employees that they were paying out. So it wasn't just about owning that piece of land. It was for standing up for what was right. What Fatima az-Zahra alayhi salam was doing when she stood up was she was standing up for the Imam of her time. That Imam of her time just happened to be her husband. But she was standing up for the Imam of her time. So sometimes we need to ask ourselves, what am I doing to stand up for the Imam of my time? You have an Imam in your time. Do you remember your Imam on a daily basis? Are the actions that you're doing on a daily basis, the initiative that you're taking, are they bringing you closer to your Imam? Or are they pushing you farther away from your Imam? That's an example that we should take into consideration. How do we defend our leadership? Would our leadership, the people who we claim that we are followers of, after we pray, after we're done with our congregational prayer and we do the ziyarah, those people that you do ziyarah, that you pay homage to, would those people be proud that you're their defenders, that you're their followers? Or would they not be proud? Would they want to push you away? Would they want nothing to have to do with you? One part about this, and I want to talk to the young men in this room, since we're talking about leadership, and we're talking about responsibility and influence, is that by virtue of being born a male, that doesn't make you a man. Being a man is different than being a male. You're born as a male, but you don't become a man until you accept responsibility. And the sooner that you accept responsibility, the sooner you're considered a man. I heard someone say this. He said, most men today, they're very big in size, they're small in spirit, and the biggest thing about them is their mouth. They know how to talk. They know how to say things. They know how to threaten. They know how to hurt people verbally. But that doesn't make you a man. The fact that you can bench 300 pounds, that doesn't make you a man. The fact that you can squat, 7 billion pounds, that doesn't make you a man. None of that makes you a man. What makes you a man is once you become a true leader and you accept responsibility. And some young men become men at the age of 13 and 14, and some don't become men until they're 40. And even at that age, they don't become men. We have a hadith that describes those types of people. It says if you get to the age of 40 and you haven't figured it out yet, and you haven't accepted responsibility, do you know what happens? The shaitan comes to you and he wipes his hand over your head like this. You know, when you take care of someone, when you love someone, you wipe your hand over their head. And he says, أهلا بوجه لا يفلح أبدا. أهلا وسهلا, you're part of my crew now. I've initiated you. You will never see success. If you haven't worked towards being a successful human being, khalas, you're never going to be successful. So understand what it means to be a man. Understand what honor is. Understand what initiative is. Look, don't rely on TV to tell you what it means to be a man. Don't rely on movies to tell you what it is to be a man. Sometimes we watch these movies and we begin to fantasize. This is the type of life that I should live. These are the type of clothes that I should wear. This is the type of car that I should drive, and everybody's going to call me a man if they see that. Not at all. Strength, if you want to be considered a man, it comes from within. See the example of Imam Ali alayhi salam? Where did his strength come from? The narrations describe him as being a person of very normal stature. But he was able to lift the door of Khaybar because of his outer physical strength or because of his internal strength. It's because of his internal strength. He worked on himself. So you want people to give you the respect of a man, you need to act like a man. You need to honor the woman in your life. You need to behave properly. That's when you become considered a man. And that's when you become considered a leader. See, people ask, and this question was asked earlier with the Q&As, when's the right time to get married? When's the right age? There's no age for it. Once you accept responsibility and become a man, that's when you're ready for marriage. So, understanding that that's also a part of leadership. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So real change doesn't happen from the outside. I mentioned this a couple nights ago. People want to change. They want to change the way they feel. So what do? They go out and they get a new tattoo or a new piercing. Or they change their hairstyle. Because they want to change the way they feel. If you want to change the way you feel, it starts from the inside. And we take the example of Fatimiya al-Zahra and Imam Ali alayhum as-salam. And when Fatimiya al-Zahra during these days, she stood up on a number of occasions and she spoke to the people. And one of the things that she did when she spoke is she defended Imam Ali alayhi salam. She has a very famous sermon where she begins, she says, what is it that they despised about my husband? وَمَا نَقِمُوا مِنْ أَبِي الْحَسَنِ. What is it that they didn't like about him? What is it that they despised? What is it that they couldn't stand about him? And then it's a rhetorical question. She answers her own question. She says what they didn't like about him, not that he was lazy, or that he wasn't helpful, or that he made people, he demoralized people, or he demeaned people. They didn't like the strength of his strike. They didn't like the fact that he was a master of the Quran. They didn't like the fact that he was confident. They didn't like the fact that he was obedient to the Prophet. They didn't like the fact that he didn't question what the Prophet had to say. Those are all things that they did that he did not do. All qualities that he had that they did not have. And most of that comes from internal strength and it comes from discipline. So leadership, a big part of leadership is also strength and discipline, having internal strength. And you know, Fatimiya al-Zahra alayhi salam, she gives us the greatest example. She laid her life living according to those principles and those values and those morals. So, what do we have to do to take leadership and initiative? We have to take ownership of our life. We have to stop blaming everybody for everything. Sometimes we get in the mood of blaming people. This person made me say this. This person made me say that. It's absolutely ridiculous. Nobody makes you do anything. You're not a robot. If you were a robot, someone can punch in commands and you move your arm without you knowing. But are you a robot? Nobody's a robot. Nobody has bionic limbs, not yet. Maybe in a few years, yes. And someone can control you. But as long as you are born as a human being, you are born with dignity. You are born with honor. You're born with freedom. So how do you maintain that? How do you honor the gift that God gave you? You take ownership and you take responsibility. Once you begin to take ownership and responsibility, that's the example that the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam set forth. All the problems that happened, all the challenges that they faced after the life of the Prophet, not once did they blame anybody else. They didn't blame anybody else for their problems. They took ownership. So understand that the highest level of leadership and the highest level of responsibility is when we can take ownership. And brothers and sisters, when you do that, people start to respect you. People start to admire you. When you do that, people start to come to you for advice. People start seeking your counsel. That's when you know that people truly honor you. Is when people begin to choose you as an influencer in their life. Sometimes you're put in a position, but nobody's chosen you. You become a manager or a supervisor or a boss and nobody wants you to do that. But when people actually give you permission to lead them, that's a great place to be. And so you look at the home of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the home of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam truly had the bare bones minimum. In terms of lavishness, in terms of furniture, you know, when you move into a home, sometimes you want the latest furniture, you want the latest styles, you want the latest fashions. That wasn't the home of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Fatima al-Zahra. In those terms, it had the bare bones minimum. However, it was the most peaceful home in Medina. It was the most loving home in Medina. Not because of what they had, but because of the way that they behaved. So much so that the Prophet himself, when he wanted to find peace and when he wanted to find comfort, he would leave his home and he would come to the home of Fatima. Imagine. The Prophet did not find in his own home what he can find in the home of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. He knew that this was a special home. When the verse was revealed, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. The narrations tell us that for 6 months the Prophet would stand in front of the door of Fatima and Ali and he would say, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Why? Because he wanted to make a point. He wanted to make a public announcement that this verse was revealed specifically for them. So that people don't come later on and say that when the Quran says the Ahl al-Bayt, it refers to other family members. The Prophet made a point out of that. And why was it, why tathir? Why this purification? Purification refers to what? Yes, the home was clean, it was tahir, it was well maintained, but true purification came from the purification of character. That's the legacy that they left behind. That's where you find comfort. That's where you find relief, is when you have pure character, when you have pure conscience, and all of that, brothers and sisters, comes from your behavior. If you become a person of good influence, leave a legacy behind so that one day when you do pass along, and all of us will pass along, someone will say, may Allah have mercy on that person's soul. He influenced me or she influenced me in a positive way. Not may God curse this person and thank God in good riddance that this person's not here. Because that's also the case with some people, because of the negative influence that they put out. That influence that you put out is all the choice. And sometimes I know in this age it's a struggle. It's a struggle. Because to be a good influencer, you have to take influence from other people. And sometimes that means that you have to elevate yourself above the current group of friends that you have, the association that you have. You don't leave anybody behind. You love everybody, regardless. But you have to ask yourself, what do I want to do with my life? And based on what I want to do with my life and where I want to be, who am I going to hang out with? That's the single determining factor. You know, I was reading in a book one time and the author was saying, that if you want to have the life that Bill Gates has, he was just giving an example. He says, if you want to have the life that Bill Gates has, right, if that's your definition of success, you start your own company and you struggle and you make money and you give a good product and all of that. He says, are you hanging out with Bill Gates, hang out with your buddies? Ask yourself that question. If you want to become the next, I don't know, LeBron James or Steph Curry, who's winning by the way? If you want to become that guy, would those guys hang out with your friends that you're hanging out with right now? If you want to be the next, you have to ask yourself the question, where do I want to be and what do I want to accomplish? And is the association that I'm involved in right now, are they going to get me there? You have to surround yourself with great people of influence if you want to become an influencer in other people's lives. If you want to leave a legacy behind. The reason we honor Fatima al-Zahra, you know, none of us here met Fatima al-Zahra face to face, but we honor her, we love her. And she's an influencer in all of our lives. This is why you're here tonight. Because you know that Fatima al-Zahra is an influencer in your life. Because she left behind a legacy. She didn't do what was popular or what was cool. She did what was right. And sometimes you have to do, in order to become a person of good influence, you have to do what's right. Not what's popular and not what's cool. Not what's trending. So going back to the home of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Fatima al-Zahra, bare bones minimum. There was nothing there in terms of materials, but it was rich in character. It was rich in generosity, a generous spirit, a loving spirit, a caring spirit. When the Quran mentions them, it says, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. When they gave those 3 consecutive nights, the food that they were going to break their fasting with, they gave it one day to a destitute, a poor person, someone who had nothing, and one day to a captive, and one day to an orphan. They did it not because of the reward, they did it because of the love of Allah, because it's the right thing to do. We need to do things because it's the right thing to do. And how quickly after the Prophet that light was extinguished. And for what sin was it extinguished? Why was it extinguished? Had they committed a crime against humanity that they sought to extinguish this light? Had they hurt somebody's ego that they wanted to extinguish this light? Had they murdered anybody? Had they stolen from anybody? Had they insulted anybody? Sometimes when you do good, you also have to pay a price.